Good morning, and welcome to Conversations with the Candidates. This morning we have Republican U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe. I'm Chris Castile with the Oklahoman. We are here downtown in our downtown studio, the Oklahoman's downtown studio in Oklahoma City. And this will be the fourth and final one of our Conversations with the Candidates. Previously, we had the two candidates for the 5th District, Congresswoman Kendra Horn, State Senator Stephanie Bice, and yesterday we had Democratic Senate candidate Abby Broyles. All of those conversations are available on oklahoman.com and our YouTube channel. And as this one will be later with Senator Inhofe. Senator, thanks so much for coming in. Good to see you. I appreciate you taking the time.
I like your new arrangements.
Yeah, it had actually been a while since we had been in the studio. Until when we started these, it had been 6 months since I've been in here. But we've been opening all of them by letting the candidates give a little bit about their background, however much you want to talk about your background, going back as far as you want. You're born in 1934 in Iowa, moved to Tulsa as a child, I think?
Yeah, I was 6 years old, moved to Tulsa, and you know, ironically, my wife and I have been married 60 years, and when I moved to Tulsa, I moved 3 doors down from where my wife was born. She was actually born in the house there.
What part of Tulsa would that be?
It's in the called Bryn Rose area. It's well, our backyard was the city limits back at that time. That was a long time ago. But you know, we had. It's really kind of funny because I'm around a lot of military people, and they're always talking about how they, you know, the inconvenience to the family. Yet there are some advantages and all of that. And our family is totally different. My wife is just a couple of years younger than I am. And the furthest she's moved in her life is 30 feet. And that is, we were born across the street from each other, and we ended up buying the house when we got married, right across the street from the house she was born in. Now we have 3 of our kids actually live right there in the block, so we kind of own the neighborhood there. So anyway, my wife and I were, you know, we went all the way through school together, never dated or anything like that. But you know, it's kind of funny. We realized it was supposed to be that way, and it was that way, and so we have now been married 60 years, and it gets better each year. Now, let me just go ahead and finish your request here.
You went to the University of Tulsa, went into the Army.
Yeah. Well, what I did from, I was a product of the draft. In fact, I never really believed that the all-volunteer military is going to work. I really didn't, because of what happened to me. I can tell you, Chris, you and I are good friends. I've known you a long time.
We're professional.
Well, professional, but anyway, well, you're right.
We have known each other a long time.
Yeah, we have.
Right.
But it has been the time. I was kind of a mess back then, and I've often wondered where would I have been if I had not been drafted and been subjected to being in the United States Army. You know, to go through at that time basic training. It's pretty tough. It's not quite like it is today. Now, it's worked, to my surprise, it's worked pretty well in terms of how they're performing, but there are some drawbacks to it. So anyway, that was a great experience that I had, and I think with a lot of the social problems that are out there today, I think the best thing that could happen is we had compulsory service. But I'm the only one who believes that. No one else on the committee does.
Kind of like
it's not going to happen.
Stepping up to a line of saying something about yourself, but then not quite saying. Were you a juvenile delinquent, or what is it that?
No, nothing criminal. Nothing criminal. I was not the sterling character that that normally runs for office.
Okay, I get it.
Or tries to represent himself.
So the Army straightened you out.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a great experience. I can't tell you. To really understand, you can't appreciate it unless you've been there, and it was, and of course you ended up meeting a lot of the people and learning. Of course, I was through the enlisted part. I did everything you can do. I'm talking about that was back in the days when they peeled potatoes, you know, and we did all these things. But we also knew that we learned an expectation as what you should expect from this great country that we have. And it's not free, and all these things. So that was a great experience. Now I went through school in Tulsa, and went through. one thing people are not aware of, because they all think about how many years I've been around. Well, most of the stuff I did in politics were voluntary at that time. Not really voluntary, but they were not a full-time job. I was a builder and developer, for example, for almost, I guess, a little over 20 years. And a lot of that was down in Texas. And I learned, and I've often said that people should not, when kids come up to me and say, Inhofe, I'd like to run for office sometime, I'd like to do something, what's the best way to prepare? I said the best way to prepare is after you go out of school, wherever you want to go out and get a job. Get a job, because the problem that we have are people who go straight from the fraternity house to elected office, and it doesn't work. I can remember that we had Mike Sinar in our delegation many years ago, and you and I were both there at that time. That was back when I served in the House. And I kind of used him as an example because the background was all out in the public without knowing how really tough it was. It's tough out there. I mean, anyone out there working knows. Now, this has nothing to do with the problems that we're undergoing in this world right now, but it is a fact that it's never easy making a living. And this is something that people need to experience and need to know the value of the private sector, that you have to be concerned about people who are providing jobs as well as people. It's just a different mentality than a lot of people have.
So the first time you ran was for the State House, right?
Yeah, I was state
House,
legislature.
Oklahoma House of Representatives. What year was that?
That was the first year of '64.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in there for a period of time. I think I was.
And you would have been in a really small minority, I would think.
Oh my gosh!
Republicans would have been a minuscule
when I was
minority
elected, I think that we had 7 Republicans. No, I know this. I started out in the House, and I went from the House to the Senate. And I always remember that first meeting, the organizational meeting we had. I might be wrong on the number, but we had about, out of 100 House members in Oklahoma, we had a total of, I believe it was 11 members of the Republican Party.
Probably all from the metropolitan areas, I would think.
Yeah,
like Tulsa,
they were at that time.
Or maybe some western Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah, and yet, you know, as you know, a lot of the people at that time were, well, I always like to tell this story. My wife's dad was Glade Kirkpatrick. Glade Kirkpatrick was a great guy, and I just dearly loved my wife's parents. Well, he was in the state legislature.
Is he with the Kirkpatrick Turnpike? Is that
no, it's a different.
Okay.
But anyway, he was in, and he did a lot of great things. And when I grew up, he was in the state legislature, and I really thought he was a great guy, and I really enjoyed him. Well, Kay and I got married, and of course, Kay was a Democrat. Most people were Democrats at that time, and it was really kind of funny because the first time I ran, she couldn't vote for me. And so she said, you know, I really feel badly about this.
At least in the primary.
Yeah, and I couldn't vote in the primary in the first time you ran. So I said, why don't you change your registration? I said, yeah, I'll do that. I went down with her to the election board. I always remember the gal there, the secretary of the election board was Clinkscales, was her last name. I don't remember her first name. But we went down there, and she went in and talked to a clerk. Said, what do you want to do? He said, well, I want to change my registration. Oh, well, you need to talk to somebody. They finally got around to the gal that was the secretary of the election board. And she went in there, my wife, and said, I'd like to change from Democrat to Republican. And she said, does your daddy know this? And she said, well, no, I don't think he does. Well, let me check with him. Now, you know, here I am, her husband, standing there, and she gets on the phone. She calls up my father-in-law, and she said, your daughter's in here. She wants to change her registration from Democrat to Republican. Is that okay? He said, well, yeah, she's making her own decisions. And it was really funny because she had to get permission from her father when she's married to me to change her registration. So times have changed.
1974, you ran for governor against David Bourne.
Now I'm going to tell you a story about that you don't know.
Well, I wrote a story about it actually.
Oh, did you?
That you and Bourne were opponents in that race, and
well, we're not opponents, so we were
yeah,
close.
you guys had made a deal. I guess so. That's what the story was, and you went around telling everybody that Bourne had changed.
Yeah.
But he beat you.
Well, he did. You know, we never dreamed. He never dreamed that he would win that primary. But we had David Hall, and I'm sorry to say, but he was corrupt. He ended up serving time and all that. And when he was in there, David Bourne and I were. Let's see, at that time I was in the state senate and he was in the state house, and we were good friends. And we said, let's both run. And, you know, most likely you'll win your primary, I'll lose mine, because David Hall was the incumbent. And so we ran, and of all things to happen, after saying nothing but good things about my opponent, I ended up losing the primary. And I remember that night I called him up and said, well, what do you want to do?
You won the primary, you lost the general.
Yeah, no, but I knew I was going to lose the general. I mean, that was without saying. Because there are a lot of people wanting to vote against David Hall because he was kind of a bad actor. So nonetheless, that happened. So I had to go through that thing and kind of faking it for the rest of the election. That's what happened. That was my first time trying to do that.
Fast forward 20 years, you wound up winning David Bourne's seat when he left the U.S. Senate. He left with a couple of years still on his term to become president of the University of Oklahoma, and you won that seat in 1994.
By the way, let me interject this. I told that same story to some Democrats. This past year, my wife had an accident, and so I found out she was, they called and said, Kay's in the hospital, and I want to get down there to St. John's Hospital. And the first plane out was at 10 o'clock. So I went to the Republican side and said, I'm going to have to leave. We need to have all the Republican votes. I said, we're not going to have this one. Well, we have to have that vote. So I went over, and I've always gotten along real well. And you know this, and a lot of people do know this, with the Democrats. And I went over, and I remember Durbin and a couple other Democrats in the leadership were sitting there, and I said, I've got a serious problem. I've got to get home. My wife she had an accident, and she's in the hospital. But I can't, you know. Would you do me a big favor? I have no reason to ask you to do this. Would you guys just delay the vote until I get back, which is going to be the next day? And they did it. And so that's when my wife sent them a thank you letter for doing this. And in that thank you letter, she told the whole story about her daddy and how she was a Democrat and had to get permission from her own parents to change her registration.
So let's talk about running this time. Obviously, you're not a big believer in term limits. Why run this time? And what is it? I mean, surely you think there are people in Oklahoma that would be qualified to serve in the Senate.
Oh, yeah.
Is it mainly because you're chair of Armed Services that you're running again?
Well, first of all, yeah, I'd share. You know, most people would consider it to be. It was
something you
it's
look
huge
forward
committee.
to.
It's one that I thought I would be doing. And now, I'll tell you why. During the Obama years, if you'll remember, Obama, I don't even say this critically about Obama, because his top priority was never military. That wasn't his deal. And so he was honest about it. And so during his last 5 years, and that would have been from 2010 to 2015, he reduced the military budget by 25%.
Well, Congress did.
Huh?
Well, Congress did.
Well, no, in his budget. He reduced his budget, and the Congress at that time, you know,
Congress has the purse strings. We can stipulate to that, I think.
Well, we can stipulate to that, but they're the majority, and he was the president.
Well, they only had a majority they only had control of the House for 2 years, the very first 2 years.
First 2 years.
And that was before the kind of that budget deal was made, where those caps were put on. You know, you had discretionary and all the other. So really, that was kind of the product of a Republican House and a Democratic Senate that came up with that budget deal that led to those
Well,
cuts.
see, I just, in a friendly way, disagree with you.
Okay.
Because on that, I was there during that time frame, and I talked to him. I talked personally to the president. And he did not have that interest, and that was a lot of negotiation that went on. The bottom line ended up, in that period of time, a reduction of about 25%. And that was the same time, let's keep this in mind, this is significant. our enemy ended up being, as you know, Russia and China. China, during the time we were reducing, or he was reducing our military budget, they increased theirs by 74%. I mean, and for the first time, we had systems out there that were better systems, artillery systems, actually, than we had.
I was going to get to the military, but so to get back to the question, so are you running again in part because you're chair of the Armed Services
Well,
Committee? How many
first
years,
of all, I'm not through yet
right,
with
how
what
many
I
years
want
do you
to
have
do.
left on that? Because there's term limits on chairmanship.
Yeah, it's 4 more years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, would you commit to serving like if you are able to serve as chair for 4 more years, would you commit to serving the full 6 years of your term?
Well, look, you know and I know, all the people that are out there that are running and serving right now. David Bourne is a good example. You never know that.
Senator Coburn, the late Senator Coburn left before his
Yeah,
second
some
term.
people leave before, and that could happen to me. And by the way, this age thing is one that I know that my opponents, I'm sure you'll get to that, I think she's making a political mistake. Talking about how age, there should be a time when you're all through doing everything. That's not true. I know people that are old at 60. I know people that are old at 50.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, and that's the whole reason, I know it sounded a little bit hokey, but when I announced for office, I decided, well, I'll go ahead and announce upside down so people know I'm fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that demonstrated it pretty well. So, but answer your question, I do want to be there to finish. I want to make sure that we have all of our systems running and working the way they should work. And if we're going to get into that issue, I'll leave it alone right here and then join it later.
Right, no, we definitely will. But you're saying that there's no guarantee that you would serve past that 4.
Or anyone else serving that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, on the issue of term limits, this is obviously one of those areas where you and the late Senator Coburn had big disagreements, earmarks being the other. I mean, do you think there should be term limits, say, for judges and Supreme Court justices? I mean, you've got
I kind of like the way
that's,
things worked in this country. I kind of like the way the Constitution. In fact,
and no term limits, without term limits.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Well, I can argue there are term limits. It's called defeat.
Mm-hmm.
And but nonetheless, we know that how the system works, and we know, and you remember many times, I said when I left the House and went to the Senate, I said one thing I'm going to do is get on the 2 committees. Well, I word this a little bit differently. There's an old document around nobody believes anymore, no one reads anymore. It's called a Constitution. If you read the Constitution, you'll see that some of the 2 things in my interpretation of the Constitution are the most significant are, number 1, defending America, and number 2, and they called them post roads back then, roads and highways. So I got on the 2 committees that were infrastructure, roads and highways, and then the military, because I honestly believed then and believe today those are the most important things that are going on and historically have been back since our Constitution.
Let me talk to you about debating your opponent. Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate, Kentucky, had a debate this week with his opponent, Amy McGrath, who, like your opponent, hasn't held political office before. Susan Collins is debating her opponent in New Hampshire, Maine, I'm sorry. Colorado, the Republican Cory Gardner's had several. Now this is an extraordinary time. I know there are incumbents, who kind of have a strategy, almost a prevent-defense strategy, where they don't feel the need to debate their opponents. But this really is an extraordinary time, and it would seem like debates would give the public an opportunity to see you and your opponent talk about things in the midst of a pandemic, with a Supreme Court nominee maybe 2 weeks away from being voted on.
Yeah, well, let me tell you why, because and I think you suspect this, if not know this. One of the things, and it goes back to political science 101. One of the things that has been used for a long period of time, never in my memory has it been used in Oklahoma, but it is you determine if you're running against an incumbent, what that incumbent has done the best, how he has excelled or she has excelled. And so the areas where I have excelled the greatest are ones when all this, and then of course as a challenger, you try to denigrate what that person has done. But wait a minute, the very things that I have done that have been successful are things that she is now saying that I didn't do when I did. Now I don't use I don't use the L word, and I think you know that. You have never heard me do that. But no,
I don't know what you're talking about.
When you don't tell the truth, what do you do?
Oh, I got you. I'm sorry. You would use the word liberal. Why would I confuse that?
But anyway, what I was going to say is, in the area of where I really have excelled is where she's coming right out and saying, in the very beginning, this happened actually on July 1st. July 1st, she came out with a list of things that she is opposed to me for, are things that were just wrong. The things that I have done right.
Give you a chance to correct
no, it doesn't. No, let me tell you why it doesn't. If you take those issues, and I would start off with, she says, Inhofe is never back in Oklahoma. Well, by count, I'm back in Oklahoma more than any member of the United States Senate from Oklahoma since Henry Bellman. I'm back here. And
how is that measured? I've never seen a measurement of that.
Oh, well, yeah.
How somebody?
It's easy to. It's very easy to see.
Okay. I mean, all the members fly back and forth.
Well, it hasn't always been that way.
Okay. No, it wasn't that way when I first went up there.
No, it wasn't that way. And who was more responsible than anybody else for changing that? They used to kid me and say, "Boy, you're lousing this thing up for everybody else."
Well, actually, the examples I used were Frank Lucas and Ernest Istick were the ones who didn't move their families up there, even though
you're talking
first went up there.
The House versus the Senate, but that's fine. Let me just go ahead and finish this,
okay? Because
I want to get it through, and then you can criticize all you want. And so anyway, never back in Oklahoma. I was always back in Oklahoma. This was laughable to my staff because it drives them crazy that I'll never stay in Washington over a weekend, unless we actually have a vote on the weekend, which might happen 3 times a year or something. I'm never there, and never will be. So she came out and said that he never goes back to Oklahoma. It's just blatantly untrue. Secondly, that he misses votes. Now this was a good one here too, because with the exception of the time that my wife had her accident and she was at St. John's Hospital, and I found out about it at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was in Washington, and I checked the quickest flight I can get back was at 10 o'clock. I went in and was not able to get the flight, wasn't able to get it done through the Republican Party. I went over to Dick Durbin and, 3 different Democrats. And I said, I've got a serious problem. I've got to get back. And if you guys would hold up a vote, which is not what the Republicans wanted, then I would be able to go back and be with my wife that one day in the hospital.
Well, those absentee numbers are available, and those are easy to look up. And I have looked them up. In the last 3 Congresses, which is a 2-year period, you have averaged missing 2.5% of the vote. That's sometimes
okay. That's probably
2.5% of votes.
Yeah.
For the last 3
this year,
Congresses.
for example, we will, when we get back, we will have over 200 votes. I missed 2. No, I don't think there's anyone watching this right now, no matter how much they hate me, is going to say that is excessive. It's a great record, missing 2 out of 200 votes. Many of those are procedural votes, as you well know, better than other
cloture votes, yeah. But they're still votes, and it varied on how you compared to other senators.
But I'm getting back to the criticism for her to state that I missed votes, when I missed 2 out of 200 votes in this last
well, it was
year.
More than 2.
And you're right.
Are you talking about?
Remember that one day in the hospital that
I'm talking about the Congress, the 2-year Congress, which is, you guys have.
Well, you said 2%. About
2.5%.
Okay.
Is what you've averaged over the last 3 Congresses, which is about 6 years.
Well, anyway, I think that's a pretty good record.
Okay.
But anyway, it's popular to try to make people think. And she would say it in very uncertain terms. He's never there. He never attends and all that. Then the other one, he doesn't do anything for Oklahoma. This is where, when she started doing this, I think she made a mistake. because our phone was ringing off the walls, Chris. People were saying, my gosh, you've done more than anybody else has done. And so we had to narrow it down. What areas do you want to look in? So I'd like to have people pay close attention to this, and then I'll shut up and then just respond.
Well, again, this is all stuff that you could respond to in a debate. I think that's where we're kind of.
It'd be nice. Wouldn't that be nice if it worked out that way? It would not if she would continue to say the same thing over and over again. He doesn't do anything for Oklahoma. So what we did was take the 3 areas that probably most people would say are the most significant in Oklahoma. That would be for the farmers. What do you do for the farmers? What do you do for transportation, as the Constitution says? What do you do for the military? And so the person that is, in terms of the farmers, the president of the Oklahoma Farm Bureau, Rod Moselle, singled me out, and I was the National Farm Bureau's biggest award of the year. And this is not just in Oklahoma. This is national.
I thought you voted against the last farm bill.
No, I'm talking about the rating now. You can, I don't know,
okay.
On individual things. This is the guy who is the president of the Oklahoma Farm Bureau.
No, I know who Rod Moselle is.
Yeah, sure. Moselle, not Moselli.
Okay. I know who Rod is.
Okay. Then the second thing in the highway, that guy is Gary Ridley. Gary Ridley was so good that Barbara Boxer, who's a Democrat, was quite outspoken every time we wanted to have him come into Washington to testify as to what to do with highways. And he's the one that said I was the National Legislator of the Year, nationally, not locally, on roads and highways. And he went so far to say that we wouldn't have had the 2 major interstates in Oklahoma City and Tulsa if it hadn't been for me. All this is on the record. And the last thing would be on military. That guy is Mike Cooper. He was the chair of the Strategic Military Planning Commission. Now what that is, you know what it is, but the public doesn't know what it is. We have 5 military establishments in Oklahoma, and he was in charge of making sure they all stay on course. He was opposed to any kind of a BRAC round. BRAC round means Base Realignment and Closing Commission, and we actually had the BRAC rounds, and that has worked very well. We don't have any that are out there. And he singled me out as being the National Legislator of the Year, national, for defense.
Okay.
So I want to say that those are the 3 areas, and yet for her to stand up in a debate and say, "Oh no, you never show up, you never show up," you know that sells.
But that's.
And so I decided,
I
made that decision back in July. Maybe it's the wrong decision in your mind, but it's the right decision in my mind. Didn't want to give her that opportunity.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about what's going on up there this week, which is with the Supreme Court nominee. I've spoken to you a couple times. We don't necessarily need to rehash the 2016 versus 2020 presidential election thing, but it seems to me with this justification that Republicans have in 2020 that didn't seem to exist in 2016, that because the president is of the same party as the Senate, that then it's okay to go ahead, here's all these times in the past where we've done it. That would seem to make it a partisan issue there, that it's all about political power rather than qualifications.
Yeah,
right?
but Chris, it's precedent. It's what's happened. It's happened for, we're talking about 100 years. And this has been going on. When you have unity in the government, which means you have the same party as the presidency, as has the Senate.
It's
for confirmation
precedent to
purposes.
use political power.
No,
right.
but I'm not passing judgment on what's happened in the last 100 years. I'm just saying that's what happened in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
What happens in 2016, we didn't have a unity government. We had a divided government. And never in history, maybe one time in history, or it might have been in 1888, the divided government ended up passing judgment. Well, whether it's good or bad, it doesn't really make any difference. You can start some kind of a contest or out there to change the Constitution, to change all this. You could do that if you were inclined to do. That's not what I am doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember anybody saying that.
Anytime a critic
established that you're referring to. Let's say that precedent doesn't really take into account just qualifications, right? That has to be what that means. Because that's how Merrick Garland would have been confirmed.
I agree with that, and
he was, I mean, he was on the D.C. Circuit, which is basically a farm team for the U.S. Supreme Court. I think there's, at that time, there were 4 members of the court from the D.C. Circuit. So it wasn't ever about Merrick Garland's qualifications.
Well, that was debatable. However, we had a hearing.
Well, how would he have gotten on the D.C. Circuit?
Where all, raked him over the coals. Look, after what you have witnessed this last week with Amy out there, it's just an amazing thing. She just ran over everybody, in my opinion, in her knowledge of the Constitution. Yes, she is pro-life, and yes, she is a conservative. She's guilty as charged, and she doesn't deny it. But she also is one that knows there wasn't one Democrat who tried everything they could this past week to put her down. They couldn't touch her.
Well, and I saw that you had criticized Democrats for being against a nominee with her qualifications. But in, I'm trying to remember the year now, I think it was 2009, when Sonia Sotomayor was a nominee. She also came from a circuit court, I think the Second Circuit, in New York. And you voted against her. I mean, so, I mean, was she qualified or not? Was that partisan, or
well,
was it?
And you also want to go back and go over each confirmation effort to confirm.
Or Kagan. Well, I'm just saying that it's not about
one at a time as they come up. I look at my philosophy, I look at what I want for the country, and I look at what I campaigned on, and people, they know me. See, that's one of the differences in this race. Everyone knows where I am on every subject. Can you think of one subject that they don't know? They know. Now, I don't have just one opponent coming up on the 3rd. I have 4 opponents. And one is a far left liberal Democrat, and that's she's running as a Democrat. I'm a far conservative. A lot of people think I'm extreme conservative Republican. Now we'd be running against each other, except that's not where it ends, because we have 3 more. Now, in terms of me, everyone knows where I am. In terms of her, of Abby, and the other 3. We don't know where any one of them are on any issue. Well,
I found out a few things yesterday.
You found out one thing, and I heard, I didn't see this, by the way. I was out in the Panhandle. I was out in Guyman, Oklahoma. And so I missed it, but I understand that she was talking about, she ran for office because she wants to do something or other with our troops, housing, and all of that. Well, we are doing that right now, and I chair the committee that does that. We have knocked our complaints down as of now, as of today, from 1 a day for 1 a month. We've done great things.
Well, I think what she said was that you were talking about the housing out there being great at the time that these problems were
No,
going.
What I said, it was a misquote on her part. I said, during that conversation, back when I was in the Army, I would have thought that was really great housing, because they didn't really have very good housing at that time. And that was from outside appearances. I went further to say that once you get inside, you've got the mold, you've got all the problems. And it was Janet, what was Janet's last name that was at Tinker Air Force Base?
Right, the
anyway,
spouse who brought up a lot of
she's the one
these
who
problems.
came to me in Washington and said, we really have bad housing conditions. And I thought it was just at Tinker Air Force Base. So we went out there, and sure enough, they were bad. But then I found out, wait a minute, they're also bad in some other areas in Oklahoma. And then we found out
in the country
that throughout the nation, we had a real serious problem. We started out having hearings. We had 2 hearings immediately. We brought in, this all started when they started privatizing. When they started privatizing housing, then a lot of the people in the military, they said, phew, this is somebody else's problem now. Well, the problem is the people who won the awards to privatize, they got careless over the years. I thought it was a good idea at the time, but then quickly we started getting a lot of complaints. It all wound up it was about 2 years ago. And so in the Defense Authorization Bill, and let's keep in mind, the Defense Authorization Bill.
There was also no military oversight. There wasn't enough military oversight of these private contractors.
No. But when I'm saying
these
are the things that we changed
in
the Defense Authorization Bill of last year, not this year.
Right.
And we've had the hearings. We had everybody come in. And right now we've had that much success, and there's more to be done. But this was a national problem that was called to our attention by one young lady who is married to someone who works at Tinker Air Force Base, and it is actually working.
I want to get back to the Supreme Court. If Judge Barrett is confirmed as expected, do you hope that the court then strikes down the constitutional right to abortion?
Would I?
Yes.
Would you hope? I would. Yeah. I'm pro-life.
Would you hope that they also strike down the Affordable Care Act, which is before?
Oh well, no. It needs to be rewritten. You can't put that whole thing in one bucket and say it's all good and all bad. There are things that we need to do, things we need to do in Oklahoma.
So you wouldn't want them to strike it down. You'd rather.
I want to change the bad parts of it, and I think that's what we're in a position to do. There's one thing not many people are aware of, Chris. I'm sure you are, but a lot aren't. It's that 1332 waiver, 1332 waiver. That's one of the things that really needs to be done. When we get back, and we're going to be rewriting a lot of this stuff during the lame duck session during next year. And one of the things that I think is very important is to have that waiver available. Because if they try to pass something, you try to pass for all the states. Oh, look at New York, look at Oklahoma. They don't even resemble each other. You're not going to be able to resolve the problems of health care unless you do it on an individual basis. A waiver would allow us to make the determination in the state of Oklahoma as to what's best for our health care. And that is it's one of the necessary ingredients.
That wouldn't probably make a lot of people feel very confident, given the rate of uninsured here is the second highest, and the health outcomes in the state, which are almost always in the bottom 3 or 4.
Well,
it's not probably.
Yeah, and I would argue with them and say that we have more caring people, and you got to keep in mind the major thing we want to do with our health care is to get the employment up, get everyone into jobs.
Where they can get employer-provided health care, is that what you mean? So they can have
employer-invited
but a lot of
healthcare
small
is the
businesses,
best.
right, don't offer it, and a lot of people have their own businesses and then have to go out and buy it on the market.
And I think we're a lot better off having Oklahoma make these decisions than having New York, having the federal government make the decisions.
Ask about and all the, of course, the previous cases I mentioned would be huge. The impact would be huge in Oklahoma, but there is a huge case from the Supreme Court in July that was uniquely Oklahoman, and that was the McGirt case.
Oh yeah, that was it.
The delegate by the end of the year, close to half the state may be living in one of the reservations of the 5 civilized tribes, which has caused a lot of sort of rethinking how criminal justice is going to have to be done here. The delegation so far has kind of spoken with one voice on this, seemingly very deferential to the state and the tribes about whether you guys get involved in legislation. I'm wondering if you personally have advocated within the delegation about taking any particular action.
Yeah, let me tell you what I've done. First of all, of the 5 tribes that are out there, I know they call some of them the chiefs and some the governors, and but for all practical purposes, they all have the chiefs. I know them all, and I called them a matter of I can't tell you what there's the day after of it. It's closely after that, saying the one commitment I want to make to you before I even talk to the governor is that I want to make sure that that all 5 tribes plus any other tribes that might have a reason for being concerned with this, that they be involved in the solution. And I have talked to them personally, not just that first time, but since that time. I said, do you think that we are doing this? Are we all acting together? Do we have the Chamber of Commerce? Do we have the governor? Do we have the tribes? All of them singing off the same sheet. And I say that they've assured me that that is going on right now. So I feel confident with that. So having said that, we need to see, and we have a lot of, I think Tom Cole is
member of the Chickasaw Nation.
Yeah, he's a member of the nation. So he has a little different relationship with the whole issue, and we look to him for a different type of leadership. And so he's wearing both of those hats. I'm forcing myself to wear both the hats by going to them first. Now, I think about property rights. I think about people who have ventured capital, people out there who are looking. And right now, one of the great things this president's done, please give me a little bit of time at the end to talk about the president, but the president has done has been remarkable in terms of being able to get us back into energy again. We went through the war on fossil fuels with the Obama administration. Now we have a president who's got us back where our employment numbers are like they've never been before, and now look at what the economy is doing.
And how are you going to relate that to McGirt?
So I'm saying this because this is a big deal. What we are doing, and the economy is good, and I like the way we're handling this situation, and I think that's consistent with what we're doing it. At the top of the ticket.
Do you feel like? I mean, do you feel like that there's a relationship of trust between you and the governments of the 5 tribes?
You know what I'd like to have you do? I'd like to. My answer is yes, but I want you to talk to each one of the chiefs and ask them.
Okay, because there was a lot of consternation from the chiefs 2 weeks ago when the EPA basically essentially reaffirmed a provision that you were responsible for in determining who was going to have regulatory authority on Indian land. That was,
and we've had that for a long period of time.
About 15 years, I guess, put into the 2005 highway bill, a provision that allows the State Department of Environmental Quality to do it rather than the federal government.
Sure.
So.
Well,
I mean, do you still feel like
the reason I did that, I'd still look back and say that was the right thing to do, is this 15 years ago. There are problems, environmental problems that are out there, and we have to face those environmental problems. I would rather it be done by the states than by the federal government. You know that. Conservatives all agree with that, and I'm guilty.
Well, I don't know that. I mean, I hear you say that. I'm not certain why you feel that way. When you say I know that,
you're not certain why
the state would,
yes,
you know, if you're trying to enforce uniform environmental regulations across 50 states and territories,
sure,
why there would be an exception in Oklahoma on Indian land?
Yeah, that's a fair question, and I think the fact that we're making an exception on a state basis too. That's where this Indian land is. That's where most of this is taking place. There's a general concept that the closer you get to where the people are, the better the government is. If you look at what has happened, the major concern, for example, I mentioned that I was the outstanding guy of the year for the farmers. Their biggest issue, that people are not aware of, was that there was a threat under the Obama administration that the state regulation of water in Oklahoma and throughout America was going to be changed and be given to the federal government. And immediately they know that, and I know that I'll probably get an argument on this, but if you're out in the Panhandle, I was out.
2005 was George W. Bush's second term, right? Or yeah, I mean, we're talking about when this provision was put into the highway bill. We weren't in the Obama administration yet. We were in the George W. Bush administration.
No, I'm talking about when we were the farmers in Oklahoma. Their major concern, number one concern, was the changing the jurisdiction of water rights to the federal government. And that, you're right, that was under the Obama administration that effort was made.
No.
And let me finish my sentence on this thing, because I was just in the Panhandle yesterday.
Okay.
And out there, it's very arid out there. However, the farmers all believed if they had one bad storm, all of a sudden that'd be justification. And the way it was written, I think it could have been justification for the federal government under the rules that were being promulgated by the Obama administration to take that jurisdiction over. They were panicking. That was the number one concern of farmers in our part of the country all year.
Okay. I think it's time to move on from that, but I think what the Indian tribe leaders always want is some kind of government-to-government negotiation and respect for their sovereignty. I mean,
okay. I think you'll get that, and I would really invite any of our people out there to talk to the chiefs. I've talked to them all, and
Okay.
We're talking about me right now.
Okay.
You know,
Well, we were talking about the environment, so
and
let's
I hate
talk.
bum raps.
So let's talk about climate change. You wrote the book in 2012, The Greatest Hoax: How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future. A lot of people remember the snowball on the Senate floor.
Mm-hmm.
But you've always made a distinction, I don't know how long, between climate change and human activity causing climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it your belief
believe
that human activity does not
let me
contribute to it?
Let me shortcut this a little
Okay.
bit. You're right. I wrote a book and I gave you a copy of it. The concept that the world is coming to an end and it's due to anthropogenic gases, that's man-made gases, is the hoax. That is a very small contributor for changes. Now, we've always had changing climate, always, throughout history, throughout the Bible. Changes taking place. But the idea that it's due to man-made gases is wrong. That's the hoax. I believed that then, I believe that now.
I think we could debate what the scientific consensus is on that, but so I guess what follows is that you don't believe any sort of greenhouse gas reductions would do any.
No, I think that, and that's there are ways of doing that, and I would endorse that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one contributing factor. It's not the factor, and that's what people are trying to, and destroying jobs just because that is the cause of the world coming to an end. I used that in my book. I said, this isn't just global warming. I'm talking about the idea that the world is coming to an end. You go to those meetings. You follow John Kerry to these meetings, or Hillary Clinton and the rest of them, and they'll try to make you believe that it's all due to man-made gas. It just isn't.
Well, whether it's all due to it or not.
It is a contributing factor, a small contributing factor.
It's a small contributing factor. So you believe that reducing greenhouse gas emissions would...
I think it's done right. It's a desirable end if it's not one that kills jobs and takes away destroys our economy in the meantime.
Then how would what would be a proposal that you wouldn't necessarily make, but that you might go along with in terms of reducing greenhouse gases?
I think reduction, they may be incentives for reduction in greenhouse gases in any number of areas. You have to look at them individually and see if that's worthwhile.
Okay. So
but the idea, and I'm not just kidding when I say the world's coming to an end. I think the people in Oklahoma understand.
Right. I mean, and I'm not sure that I ever hear people say the world is coming to an end, but they talk about coastal cities. They talk about fires, stronger storms. I mean, and consistently higher temperatures.
Yeah. Well, that's been, and again, this has been happening throughout recorded history and non-recorded history, as long as we can remember. Let's
talk about the military for a bit. The president wants all of the troops in Afghanistan home by Christmas. That's about 4,500 troops. You've been there many, many times. You used to go there 3 or 4 times a year to Afghanistan. Do you support that? I mean, is it time to get every last U.S. troop out of Afghanistan?
No, and it's again, yes, I know the president says things sometimes that I wish where I could be involved in having the rewording of it. In this case, it has always been condition-based. Anytime you are someplace because there are threats to our national security, and you say, all right, we're going to pull out Christmas of next year, that's calendar-based. That's not condition-based. And this president has always been condition-based, and he is today. So the answer is no. If you're saying they have to have everybody out by Christmas, that's not the way to do it. The way to do it, I think what he's aiming for is to have conditions reach the point where we would be able to have, because of the change with
is that what he wants, or
working with our allies?
Is that what you're telling him he wants? He's been clear on that since he first ran for office, that the troops should be out of Afghanistan. He had to be kind of pulled kicking and screaming into that deal, I think was it January, about the conditions on the ground. And the generals don't want to pull everybody out right now. So is it going to happen? Is the last troop going to be home by Christmas?
No.
Okay. also in the last 4 years, and this began.
Are you leaving enough time we talk about the president a little bit?
You can bring him into any part of this that you want, but I want to ask you about where your committee's going,
Oh yes, sir.
Besides the drawdown in troops in the Middle East over the last few years, there's been a huge drawdown in Europe. A lot of them have come back to the states that we're in, all over Europe, in Germany and elsewhere. Where should they go to next? I mean, where do we need? We had this strong kind of Cold War presence. Where should they go to now? Where are you afraid? Where is there a chance that we could fight China? Where is there a chance that we could fight the Soviet Union?
See, the problem right now with China and the Soviet Union, but primarily China is everywhere. And there was a time when China never got involved in warfare unless they did it from their own city limits. That's not true anymore. You look at what they're doing in the South China Sea. They're up to 7 islands right now. It's illegal. I mean, this is not, they don't own this land. And yet they have built these islands in the navigational way of us, inhibiting our trade, inhibiting our military activity. And this is going on there. At the same time, they're also all over Africa, not just Djibouti. People talk about Djibouti. No, they're there. Yeah, they have a major base in Djibouti. I've been there, and I've seen what they're doing. But they also go as far south as, well, they're going all throughout Africa.
So it's not just Asia.
And so this is everywhere.
And you are, I think, part of creating a command in Africa.
I was. Right? It's AFRICOM.
But it's not. There aren't a lot of U.S. troops stationed there right now.
Well, let me justify what we did there. The only area, the entire continent of Africa was under 4 commands. Those commands were the Pacific Command, the Central Command, the Unified Command, and the anyway, there are 3 different commands, not 4. So why shouldn't that continent have its own command? So we developed, and I was responsible for this somewhat, AFRICOM, Africa Command. Now, we have a general that we talk to all the time there. They change them around like they do all commanders of all commands. But we're looking at what is happening right now. All of a sudden, we're getting a lot more terrorist activity in West Africa. Before, it was in East Africa. Now it's in West Africa. That's become really a serious thing. I've talked to the president about this. This is a major change that we're going to have to do. And what I'm saying now is, yes, I'm proud of the fact that I was responsible for the AFRICOM, for establishing it, and it was the right thing to do, and it is the proper thing. And that gives, I've got to throw this in there because people are all going to assume that the president's not going to win because the media hates him so much. And I have to say this, the one thing that these polls don't measure is depth. And if you say or ask the question, who do you want to be the next president, who are you going to vote for, and they say Trump, then those people generally would walk through fire to vote for Trump. Now, as far as the Democrat nominee, a lot of them might not even vote. The depth isn't there, and I think we all understand that.
I've been given the signal here that we need to wrap up, but I did want to ask one more question about the military, and that is.
Well, okay, you got to give me one last shot, though.
Has there been any discussion about holding hearings in Senate Armed Services about the allegations that the Russians were putting bounties on U.S. troops?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that if we want to do it. That's not what I.
No, I'm asking you the question about whether your committee has talked about doing that.
Yeah, we have.
You have, and so I mean,
we have, and we very likely will do that. Let me mention. I got to mention one last thing about this race that's going on, because it is serious. I know that Abby was very excited about the fact that Elizabeth Warren was endorsing her, and Elizabeth Warren herself said that Abby thinks like she does. We agree on many things, most things. Let me tell you what she officially agrees on. We have Elizabeth Warren is for defunding the police. She's for giving up our Second Amendment rights. She's for opening the borders. She's for abortion on demand. She's for gutting our military, and she's for the Green New Deal. Now,
we don't have Elizabeth Warren here to respond to.
Well, let me tell you. But no, Elizabeth Warren has already said that Abby's her kind of person, and she's
No, but I
endorsing
mean,
it.
I'm not familiar with where she is specifically
you're
on all
not?
of those. Not on all of those issues. I'm not.
Okay,
so
well, I am.
apologize.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Senator. Thanks so much for coming
You're
in. I really
welcome.
appreciate it.
You bet.
I need to ask you real quick. I forgot to get to the vote next week on the coronavirus aid. Are you planning to vote for more aid next week if the Senate Majority Leader brings up a package?
Well, see, this is what we don't know is going to take place. On September 10th, we came up with a package, and at that time, we thought that the Democrats were going to embrace
Schumer,
that. And we all were lined up thinking that was going to happen. And at the last minute, Chuck Schumer said, no, I'm going to get the Democrats all to vote against it because it took a supermajority to pass it. This is something that everybody really wanted in this thing. And yet and the reason was, and this was common knowledge on the floor, no one would deny this, they thought if we can not have a package, we can blame the president for this, and he'll take the rap for this. That's not going to work because everybody knows it was right down party lines that we did not have.
So you don't know if you're going to vote next week then? Is that still uncertain?
I'm inclined to think that we will.
And how will you vote on that?
Well, we've got to see it first.
Okay, you haven't seen the package at the
No,
majority?
if it's a package that we already passed on September 10th, I'd vote for it.
Okay. Senator, thanks so much for coming in.
You're
I really
welcome.
appreciate it. And thank you for watching the interview with Senator Inhofe, and the other conversations with the candidates that we've had in the last couple of weeks are available on oklahoman.com and our YouTube channel.